So, I am your host, and welcome to Inside Nearshoring with me, Alfie.
Welcome, Kirill. Thanks a lot for being here. I appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thank you, Alfie, for inviting.
No worries. So I think what we'll do is just to get everybody acclimated and we all know who we're talking to. I'd love for you to tell our viewers a little bit more about, who you are, what you do, and why this, say, Inside Nearshoring episode is important to you.
Thank you. So, to be quite brief, I guess I'm Kirill, or in French part of Switzerland and in France, Cyril. I'm CEO and the founder of company Mobilunity, a Ukrainian-based company providing nearshore development services. Our primary focus and our primary service is providing dedicated development teams, and this is what we are doing for past 4 years. The company itself is approximately 200 people now, and aside of my primary duty of actually leading the company, of course I'm applying my best effort in regards to promoting to be really promoting the whole nearshoring idea to our potential European markets, and or as the people say in Israel or Japan, offshoring it is, whatever. So to make a long story short, I'm very excited about your show launch. I'm willing to be part of this pilot episode for now, and I would hope that such a show and the episodes next with different people from different organizations, of course, would be of an interest to our potential audience, and hopefully things will work out very well.
All right, awesome. So as you mentioned, this is all about going inside and showing people things that, maybe they wouldn't have known years ago unless they had already tried nearshoring, or unless they were kind of industry insiders. So with that being said, with the current situation, with COVID-19, the pandemic, do you believe that this topic is something that is very important now? Or maybe people should just wait until, the pandemic is over? I mean, how do you feel about that?
Well, I cannot advise to people, of course I'm biased, but what we can be fairly stating is that we see an increase of interest to what we are doing now. And the reason behind this is quite obvious and natural. The people are no more working in offices. So no matter what, you would still be coping and somehow working with remote people. Of course, right now, after maybe 1 or 2 months of lockdown at homes and home offices, the majority of companies are still working with the developers, the teams that they were hiring in offline mode. They know each other well, and such condition and circumstance puts a little bit of constraint over the model overall. But if you think what may happen in 6 months from now, or maybe in a year, if the world is really changing towards the direction where all the futurists are now saying, we'll be hiring people staying remote, we'll be assessing them remote, we'll be judging on their soft skills and hard skills, all staying remote. And if it's all remote, then why limiting yourself to something that you have locally in your city or in your country? We see people are coming now more and more just to inquire, just to ask the questions about how exactly this can be organized and whether or not such experience will be smooth for them. Maybe sometimes they come over even just to hear how exactly we are managing our business, because the core of it is still working with remote development teams. And this is what we were doing for past, as I said, 4 or 5 years. The companies who try this now, they of course get lots of challenges, lots of new things happening to them. But I think the answer to your question would be, of course, the readiness of a company, the scope and domain of where they operate. But down the road, the borders will be less meaningful and significant to hiring and attracting the right people. And this is what we believe in.
All right. So, and it's interesting you said scope and domain, right? So with that being said, who needs nearshoring? I mean, is it industry specific? Are there industries you as a business owner would say, you know what, I'm not going to touch that when it comes to nearshoring? Or is it pretty much everything? Could you please just give some insight, into that process and into how things work for the people watching?
Yeah, I can say that there are some specific domains or industries or verticals, as we say, that are more easier, let's say, are applicable to nearshoring model. So something that is relevant to, let's say, e-commerce, this is a considerably easier topic than, let's say, banking, just because of obvious compliance, security, legislation, and all the questions like this. But even looking at our 40 plus clients now, we are quite represented on a very various industries. We have insurtech, we have insurance, we have fintech, we have little bit of banks, we have e-commerce, we have small businesses, we have startups, we have hardware and software. We have so many domains all in one model. So it seems that there is nothing that may say like, no, this is the best thing to go, and like, if you are in this specific industry, go Ukraine, go Belarus, go Poland. This is the right move to do. And the or opposite, like, some industries which are not a go. We have number of cases when different sectors, different domains, even these, like, security sensitive domains, are still utilizing the most of what nearshoring or offshoring can be provided. We have Israeli companies handling the security for local, domestic market and internationally, who are also having their teams in Ukraine, for example, and things like that. They probably mean that there are no restrictions. They are just right and wrong things of making nearshoring or offshoring. And this is the matter of how people approach, how the businesses will actually consider this opportunity, and how they will be implementing this challenge for themselves.
All right. And now you mentioned, you said rights and wrongs, right, of nearshoring. Now, I tend to believe that in most things, not just nearshoring, that a lot of it comes down to education, right? Do you know what to do, right? If you've ever gone into a restaurant and the service is horrible, I just feel like, you know what, those people aren't trained. They're not bad people, they're just not trained. So with that being said, do you believe that it's possible or necessary to train your clients, right, to understand what nearshoring is? Because to be honest, actually, let's get into that, right? What would be your definition of nearshoring?
Okay, so nearshoring, opposite to offshoring, is an ability or a model when the client is utilizing the best of countries and markets potential nearby to their domestic market. I'm not willing to put accent or focus purely on labor market, because, well, nearshoring models may vary, and the way the engagement models may be on project based, or like R&D center, or dedicated team, or something else. We are not touching up on this method. Nearshoring just widens the borders around the country or some union, let's say European Union, making it possible to collaborate, to build partnership with the countries nearby who are more or less on the like mentality, and which is very important, not too far from distance perspective and time zones. This would be probably my more or less formal definition, maybe too wordy one, but still, like, this is something that we put under the nearshoring term.
Okay. All right. Well, the more words, the better. So don't worry about that. Now, when it comes to your current clientele and what you've been building, what would you say is the hardest part about what you do? I mean, what's the most difficult thing, the difficult aspect of being a supplier, right? Because obviously, now I would assume that the hardest thing about being a client is picking a provider, right? But what's the hardest thing about being a provider?
I think, and you touched up on this, like asking your previous question. It is a challenge for us as a supplier or a vendor to convince our clients to listen to us or to trust us. The thing is that many are coming for the sake of like, no, maybe the market is very much limited, or they need to be able to scale up or down very fast, or they are seeking for specific technology talent that is not as available on the market or whatever. But the thing is, once they come to a vendor like ourselves, they got to be hearing and listening to what we advise. We're not never making the decisions on behalf of our clients, but we are very proactive in our intent to be sharing what we already know. Because otherwise, if we were not accumulating this experience from previous years of ours and like hundreds of clients that we are working with, then what would be our value that we are charging money for? So there is a good percentage of clients who are sure that they need the nearshoring services, who are certain about, let's say, in our case, Ukraine and Mobilunity as a company. But then when they come to us, they stop listening to us. They may be doing their own things, well, just because it fits into their process, or maybe things that were common for them in else destinations, maybe Asia or like somewhere else, nearshore, whatever. The thing is that we want to be heard, and of course, like we are applying our best effort in our intent to be explaining and proving that our expertise is of a big need and value to our clients. This is a challenging part, which I think is the most complex. If there is a full trust in between of the companies, not essentially we as a provider are always right. We are never telling a client how to act. We are bringing up the knowledge, the risks, the best practices, the cases we used to have, and we provide a recommendation, so to say. The decision will be still on client, but if it's decision made with the education in mind, with the educated decision, so to say, that would probably be the best way of utilizing our model, our expertise, and our service.
Okay. Now, when we talk about education, because that tends to pop up a bit, right? Like I talk about it, you've talked about it, that word kind of pops up. And I guess the question is, other than hopefully this show, right? Where would you say is a good place to start to learn about nearshoring, right? Do you have things that you post or present? Is there some platform? What would you say is the best way to learn about it?
I can immediately mention probably one of the most trustworthy sources for information. That would be probably the peers around every business. So we are certain that in Europe specifically, it doesn't even require these Facebook 5 handshakes or whatever. Yeah. If you ask your peers about their experience with nearshoring, I can be giving you a 90% guarantee that most likely there was somebody who already has an experience like that. Mm-hmm. These little stories, they may be initially incomplete, or they may be sounding too radical, too straight. Like, no, I didn't like this. Ukraine is bad, or Ukraine is super good. Go for Ukraine. These things, if they being asked one by one and not analyzed in bulk or all together, they may be a little bit confusing. But once you get 3-4 opinions from the peers around you, I'm pretty sure that you would understand that, well, there are things definitely not worth of doing. There are destinations at this moment definitely not worth of trying because of some reasons. And this network of yours will tell you about that. Then it comes to to choosing the model, and the vendors are capable of providing such models, different engagement models. Outsourcing, outstaffing, dedicated teams, managed teams, freelancers, whatever, R&D center. Then, of course, now you start reading a little bit of blogs, but the most blogs are still written by the people who are whether trying the services or who are actually providing them. And then it comes to a choice of a couple of vendors who might be on your shortlist, who you think are a fit from just the visual perspective. You explore their website, you see what they are writing about, what they're telling about, things like that. Talking to these people would ideally bring any potential client or person interested to whether a point when the person realizes that, well, these all models, these are not for me now. Maybe in a year when we have, I don't know, more money, or maybe in a year when we need more people, or in a year when we are done with the vision towards the product. That may happen. Or the end point might be like, okay, I like what these and these people are telling me from different organizations. Now I need to define like, what's important to me as a potential client. I want this, and that. Such tips, such tricks, such methodologies are not as, I would guess they are probably the same in every industry. That's why I'm like, no, it wasn't a question that is on one hand easy to answer, on the other hand, like, if I would go for any service, I'd probably do the same. But then there are people who are in this industry who are not prompting you to like, to buy from them right away. They're just like sharing a little bit of insights. And like your show probably would be one of such sources. My LinkedIn could be one of such sources. My blog on some platform might be such a source. The webinars that some Polish company might be doing could be such source of information. It's just a matter of how much time you might be willing to devote to, like, to getting prepared to this kind of analysis and conclusions. But I think overall the structure of the approach would be probably like this.
So trust but verify.
Yeah.
Okay, fair enough. Now you did mention a few things that I want to kind of touch on at least. I heard the term freelancer. Okay, so I know that a lot of people who are tuning in are going to say, well, what's the difference, right? What's the difference between me paying somebody directly and me dealing with this company? Could you, just give us a bit more information as to why not use a freelancer, right? If is nearshoring and freelancing the same thing? Tell us more about that.
Good. First, I wouldn't advise not to use freelancers. I mean, like, I'm not in that position. I mean, like, even to clients of ours, if they come over and they are hesitant, we tend to be asking some questions to understand if they really need a vendor, or maybe the freelancing model might be a fit for them. When it comes to freelancers, I think the most tricky part is that you deal with the individuals, not the company. And the liability and responsibility would be exactly the same as this model operates, right? Yeah. If you are working with a freelancer, you may be very lucky in getting an amazing person. And of course, you would be happy not to be paying any extras to a vendor in between of your company and the actually executor, freelancer. On the other hand, the freelancer himself might be in a good need for some environment, or maybe some process that we as the vendor and supplier are providing. And in this case, the freelancer might be, for some companies in some models, might be more effective within our ecosystem than working directly. That's the freelancer's need. Yeah. Maybe the company who comes to us as a vendor, they want to ensure intellectual property handling, for example. Yeah. They want to ensure there is a proper tracking of what is actually happening on the freelancer side without screen capturing or things like that. But they still want to be ensuring that this freelancer is physically at his desk, if it's an office, or is reporting in details on what exactly has been done. Or maybe they does the code commits, I don't know, twice a day, for example. It all comes from perspective of what the client might be willing to get and willing to receive as a service. Because if the service is just a person who sits somewhere and does some job, freelancer might be perfect. Yeah. But what happens if a freelancer gets sick, if freelancer needs more money, but the wage doesn't allow him to earn more money? What happens if some richer client comes over to this freelancer and proposes a little bit higher pay, or maybe a more interesting project? Will the client suffer from this kind of risk, so to say, or if freelancer decides to leave? And what would a vendor like ourselves do on such matters? Of course, we are put and we are designed in a way that we got to be taking care of 3 R's of what we say are parts of nearshoring: relationships with the client, retention of the developers, and recruiting for the developers for the new team as it is. We provide this service with this specific value. So comparing us and the freelancers, the lead, the potential client needs to keep in mind whether or not they are in need for these specific items that we are offering. And they got to be asking the vendor, potential vendor, why would I work with you and not with the freelancers? If the vendor is not prepared to answer, I think you need a house vendor or you need the freelancers.
Okay, fair enough. Now, you mentioned your 3 R's, okay? That was relationships, retention, and recruitment, right? Those three. Now, out of those three, which is the most difficult to maintain?
Well, I cannot choose any, to be honest, because it seems that they all are very much important. I can be saying purely from my personal perspective. I can say that the relationship part is something that I myself am investing most of my efforts into, just because, well, maybe because I have very good people in charge of other two. And on the relationships part, I'm still like, as a frontman of a company, I still need to be on the very edge of this and to be representing the company together with my partner business development,
Well, yeah. Okay, all right, fair enough. All right. So I suppose from that point of view, we get a good idea, right, of kind of the ups and downs, or kind of the processes that go into place. So how about this? Okay, how about you share with us, maybe not specifically, I don't want anyone to get mad, I don't want you to name any names, but what would you say would be an example of just, a bad experience that you've had, right? As a business owner, as a supplier, what has been really the worst, so to speak, that you've had happen? And did you see it coming? Was it something that was a shock? How did it get to that point?
I can recall a couple of cases like this, but oddly enough, like my example that I would be willing to share now is not about the biggest client of ours, not about the richest client of ours. It's just about the client who stepped into this relationship without as a supplier, without clear understanding why they do it. It was a company from, that doesn't matter where they're from. It was quite a big company that had a product, and they decided, I still cannot understand why they decided to go nearshore. Probably because of the cost, I would suppose, but it wasn't even the case, because the company is well funded, and they didn't need it as much, I would say. They did a big job in searching for the potential vendors. They chose us. They were very right, so to say, at this engagement part, when we were ensuring that this is a right client for our developers. This is a right client to be running the long-lasting relationship and things like that. But then when the job actually started, when the team was provided, well, some weird things started happening. So there was lack of communication, there was lack of feedback, there was no direction given to the actual team of ours, there was no attention to important things to us as a vendor and to the development team whom we hired for them. So it was just a weird understanding by our side, of course, that we are somehow already in this relationship with this client. We are willing to help, but we are not being heard. We are not being allowed to be talking on these matters, to be advising something that, well, would be very much important for the client to actually survive, or to be successful with this remote team. It all lasted for maybe 5 months, when they literally we were paying for service that they were not receiving in full, because whatever we were telling, it wasn't heard. Whatever we were sending, it wasn't read. Whatever we were asking wasn't followed up. 4 or 5 months passed, maybe somewhere in between. They had to cut the team. They had to cut relationships with us, and they left unhappy, just because they said We were expecting something else. We are very much upfront honest with what we are providing, how this works, and what kind of time investment it requires. Not speaking of financial investments.
Yeah.
We are, I think, very much transparent, but well, it wasn't taken this way, unfortunately. Maybe due to some gaps on our side as well. I don't know. Like, no, I'm biased. I was on one of the sides, right? But probably that was the case that I would be just giving here, stressing out that it is very much important to any vendor who wants to do their job good to be in the full communication, in full trust mode with the client of theirs. And this is what we are trying to make with every client of ours as well, of course.
All right. Now with Mobilunity's clients, not everyone is in Europe, right? So you have people from around the globe. When it comes to that communication bit, how do you manage that when it comes to language and time difference, right? Because we're dealing with different countries, different, I suppose, cultures, belief systems. I'm pretty sure there are countries that do not refer to what you do as nearshoring, right? I've heard body leasing. I've heard, I mean, this doesn't sound right to me, but I've heard it before. What would you say to that? I mean, how do you manage that?
I agree it is a challenge, and I agree it's way easier for us and for the teams to be working somebody in in standard meaning of nearshoring, right?
Mm-hmm.
If it's Switzerland or Germany or France or UK or Norway, Sweden, we are that's 2-3 hours flight, 1 or maximum 2 hours time difference. That's easy. When it comes to, let's say, further markets, maybe North America or it may be Asia, it is different from the process organization point of view.
Mm-hmm.
The client is not present during the time when the team is operating. We are getting our clients prepared to this. We are stressing on a few points which are very much crucial to this long distance clients of ours. We explain the essence of proper planning. We explain we advise the way to organize their process with the remote team. When the remote team gets any questions, what they are supposed to be doing until they get the answers, just because the answer from North America or maybe from Asia may be coming in just next day or in 2 days, if some holidays pop in. Language wise, of course, with North America, it's still easy because every developer of ours, it's a must thing. They are communicative in English. When the skill is not enough, we are giving the classes. We are doing all the possible tutoring on site of our office to ensure that the person communication is in line with what the client is expecting. With clients from Asia, it is more complicated just because English is less used there in the business environment and in common life. We find the solution, so to say. If it's one country or another, we are sometimes providing a communications manager knowing the language of that country to be bridging what's in between of the headquarters somewhere in Japan or South Korea or elsewhere, and our team here who is just talking English, for example.
Yeah.
If it's time difference, like I mentioned, with America, it's one side different. With Asia, that would be other side difference when these Asian countries are way ahead of Ukrainian time zone, and we got to be starting, let's say, a little bit sooner in the mornings. Not everyone likes it, but again, this also comes to recruitment when we know exactly what to expect from a client from Tokyo or maybe from South Korea or elsewhere. So these points are all important to us. We are putting a significant effort into ensuring that we are capable of providing the service that the clients will appreciate. Otherwise, to us and to the client, it will be loss of time and lots of money to step into relationships that do not have good chances to actually prevail.
Okay. So and I guess just to kind of sum that up, like you said, you're in the middle.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So you're in the middle. So you kind of, because of just where you are geographically, you're in the middle of both of all time zones, kind of.
Yeah. So like, with talking of South Korea or Japan, for example, the guy started 8, for example, 8 in the morning, and we still have 2, 3, 4 hours of simultaneous work with the Japanese colleagues of ours. If it's America, then the teams are advised to be starting later, let's say maybe afternoon, maybe sometimes 11 a.m., maybe 1 p.m. And to those people who we hire who prefer this kind of day schedule, of course, it's also a benefit to be working on projects like this. And we still provision an ability to the headquarters to be intersecting with their teams for significant period of time, for at least 2 to 3 hours, to be able to manage the process on a daily basis.
Okay, fair enough. So how about we do this? All right, just to kind of, I don't want to take too much of your time. And we want to get into another segment, but how about I ask you just a few more questions, and these questions are going to basically be kind of, impartial, non-biased. Okay, so
Let's try.
Let's try. Let's figure it out. Okay, so if you had to choose, since you are in Ukraine, correct, in Kyiv, if you had to choose another country to nearshore to, where would it be?
If I am a business in Ukraine that thinks of nearshoring, or if I'm a European business.
Any business. If you're a European business that's thinking of nearshoring, now obviously you'd want to say Ukraine, which is fair.
Yeah, but I cannot. Yeah, I understand what they're talking about. I would say Poland. And the reason behind this is that first, I used to work with Poles. These are good developers, guaranteed. Second, I understand Ukrainians very well, and I can say that mentality-wise, Polish and the Ukrainian developers are very alike. They have alike motivation, they have alike approaches, they have alike level. So I can see that it could be Poland. Of course, I have reasons not to be going to Poland if I am allowed to say that Ukraine is better from some perspectives. But we cannot touch up on this, and I don't want your show to be too biased, so to say.
Well, don't worry. Once I get a Polish person on, then I'll kind of push them to say Ukraine.
Okay, then let's make it then like a disclaimer. I can put it on my whiteboard there. I am biased here, and I'm selling Ukraine. Ukraine has lower brain drain problems than Poland does. Just because Poland is part of European Union, where people are free to migrate, to be working in any European Union country and things like that. Those Ukrainians who wanted to get a permission to work in European Union, they already undertook all the procedures. They made their complex decision of really going for good, or maybe for long-lasting contract somewhere in Europe, and they're already there. Everyone else in Ukraine, they are not in active search for some opportunities in Europe. They want to stay in Ukraine just because the way they earn and what they can be affording themselves in Ukraine, it's a good life. I mean, they really are in a top percentage of people in Ukraine who, as an industry, they really earn very good. And those who stay here, well, obviously, there is nothing as a competition between working for some Ukrainian company here in Ukraine or going elsewhere, like in Germany, in France, and in Poland. So this is probably the most and the biggest advantage of choosing Ukraine over, let's say, Poland or European Union country. There are disadvantages, I know, but I'll not be mouthing myself. I can be telling this to any client that asks. Yeah, I can be open on that. No problem.
Gotcha. Don't worry. If you say something too bad, we'll just edit it out. It's fine.
Good.
Yeah. So here's another one. Okay. Now, out of all of the countries where you currently have clients, if you had to choose one to move to live in, which would it be?
Can I still say Zurich, because I'm still quite often in Zurich, and I like being there. Is it an option?
Yeah, of course. As long as
okay, cool. Right. Then it would be Zurich, Switzerland, just because I appreciate the way I feel there, and I appreciate the business culture there. and this is probably the most frequently visited city of of my travel map before the coronavirus, of course.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure after it as well. And just to add a few more points on for the sake of uprising Zurich, the majority of our clients are still from Switzerland, from German part of German-speaking part of Switzerland, and from Zurich area specifically. So yeah, that would be Zurich.
Okay. Well, I thought you might have picked maybe a warmer weather location, but Zurich
I
is,
would
no,
love
Zurich is,
to. Oh, you know what? I can
no,
dream too much because I haven't been traveling for the 3 months. So that's I have lots of choices to go. What would be
yeah.
yours, Alf?
Me, in terms of vacation or living, where we have
Living.
living. So
Yeah.
I would go probably, let me see, that's a good one. Yeah, I do have a soft spot for France, right? I do have a soft spot there. However, I would probably have to go right now. Japan's very interesting. Tokyo is very interesting. It's. I don't know if I would love it living there, but out of all the places I've been, Tokyo would probably be the most interesting. And you know me, I'm more into not being too comfortable, right? So I'd want to go there, kind of test the limits, and then maybe I'll come back. I'll say, you know what, this wasn't for me. But to give it a shot, yeah, Tokyo. And I think in terms of expense, I'm always thinking of the money. So it's right up there with Zurich, right? So,
I'd say Tokyo is a little bit cheaper, but
yeah.
I totally agree with you, Alfie. And Tokyo would definitely be on my list as well. Maybe almost same high as Zurich.
Okay, fair. And I also think of the weather. I mean, it's an island nation, so it's warmer. Zurich is great. Switzerland's great. Although if I had to if I had to pick a language, if I had to learn one, it might be easier. Okay, that sounds insane. Of course, it's not easy learning Japanese, but at least there's one language to learn. Whereas in Switzerland, I don't know if I'd go Zurich. So I'd have to decide, do I want to learn German, French, Italian, or do I want to be somewhere where I can only speak English? But thankfully, Switzerland, most Swiss people tend to speak English, especially in the German-speaking parts.
Yeah.
Cool. So
I agree.
yeah. So here's one more thing. Now that we're dealing with COVID-19, okay, what would you say what would you hope to take positively out of this experience, out of dealing with COVID-19, and the world will see afterwards, right? What would you hope to take out of this experience?
There are two parts of my answer. First, I want to give a little of insight from Ukrainian only situation. So Ukraine overall, we are not taking IT into our mind. Overall, Ukraine is not too computer literate nation, so to say. Not speaking of developers. Developers are very cool. But with the COVID thing, with the crisis that hit us immediately, I see such a growth of people who are way far from computers, from internet, something that happens there. But I see these people are now using the conferencing tools. They're using the word processors. They're using spreadsheets. They're using whole set of tools that was kind of too mystery for them 3 months ago, literally 3 months ago. It was just a no-go. I see the offline businesses building up the e-commerce shops or some representation on internet in a way that it also speaks for their maturity. If I saw this 3 months ago, I wouldn't even believe that. And I see the biggest take from this, of course, the scary times for Ukraine specifically, is that the whole nation and all the people are now way more comfortable in operating, let's say, internet, remote things, remote collaboration, some platforms that are providing different accesses to different assets, so to say. Speaking of whole world, I'd probably say exactly the same, but maybe with different idea behind it. I would hope that after the COVID-19 crisis is gone and we're all back to normal life, we still remember these times when first we need to remember how meaningful and significant the live collaboration is. Second, we saw all that remote work can be as good as the office work. And with this in mind, it waives the borders of minds, of mentalities, of philosophies to businesses who are now more capable of bringing on more alternatives, so to say. I'm not pushing for our model specifically. I'm just saying that with the conditions we all got to with this crisis, we can be learning lots of very nice things and then utilizing them all time afterwards, lifetime.
Gotcha. Okay, so I think what we'll do now is, since we've had a decent conversation, and I hope that everyone that's been viewing has learned a lot from it. Obviously, we could talk on, and we could we'll do this again. We can go in for a long time, but let's save the last couple of questions from other sources. Okay, so what we want to do every single episode, every single show, is get those who are curious involved. Right. So we have a couple of questions just from the internet. Right. We're not going live right now. So these are questions from the internet. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask you some of these questions. Both of us, of course, can discuss it. But, some will be simple. Let's just see what we have. OK.
Yep.
So let's just go straight into it. OK. The first question, is Ukraine safe?
I'm very biased, Alfie. Seriously. I mean, I can be answering, and yes, it is, but nobody would trust me because I'm Ukrainian. So if you don't mind, I can just route it back to you as an expat, as an American who lives in Ukraine for how long? Like 5 years, I suppose.
Oh, maybe 6. 6, yeah.
Yeah, close to 6, right? And
Yeah.
this fall will be 6. Please go ahead and probably just answer yourself. I'm just as a listener.
Well, I'll say that you can be trusted. But either way, I would say that Ukraine is a place where it's just like any big city, right? Obviously, there has been some bad press, so to speak, in recent years. However, nowadays, everyone's getting bad press. So I have always said that when it comes to Ukraine, it's a place where you can feel maybe uncomfortable, especially, say, as an expat, but you don't feel unsafe. And I think a lot of it has to do with the media's portrayal, with media not having a clear understanding of what is actually going on. So things like that, I believe, is what really can hurt the perception. But overall, it's like any big city. Just like if you were in the U.S., right? If you were in New York or D.C., minus the guns, right? So it is one of those things where, I think that Ukraine overall is safe. And then, of course, I'm still here. You're here, right? So
I could be in Zurich now, huh?
Could be in Zurich, exactly, right? You could have left, gone to Zurich. I could have said, screw it, I'm going to go to Tokyo, but we're still here.
Yeah, I'm just a few cents from my side. I see lots of expats working for different companies, especially in IT here. Of course, there is a press pressure, and what happens on our east and on our south. These are known serious problems to us as a nation. And of course, we are certain that sooner or later, hopefully sooner, we'll get all the lands back and it will be a full peace in the country. But speaking of safety, of being present in any big city of Ukraine that Ukraine now keeps the control over, it is safe, common life. COVID-19 has now hit Ukraine slightly less than the countries in the European Union and of course the United States of America. The people are moving freely. People are talking English. Not everyone does, but when they don't understand, they at least smile and they say, "Yeah, sure," but all in Ukrainian, and they are trying to assist somehow. So I, using this opportunity, I would also want to welcome everyone to come to Kyiv, to Ukraine, to see yourself. It is safe. It is very nice, and it has amazing people here around.
Hopefully, though, maybe in the summer the fall, not so much the winter.
Yeah, but like, we're still on, like, the flights are still banned by like July start, I guess.
Yeah, fair enough. Okay, cool. So here's another question I have. Reading here. Okay, this is more direct, and I think it's an easy one for you. What team size is good for nearshoring?
We, like, that's part of our internal discussions and the belief, but we think that when business comes for one or two developers, it can be bringing value to the client, but usually it's a best start, so to say. To get real value from nearshoring, you would hope, in ideal scenario, of course, like there are many of these scenarios where the specific need implies the size of one or two developers. But in general speaking, the teams of 5 to 10 people are bringing the most of what nearshoring model may be giving you, cost inclusive. Because on the team size like this, you would also feel it on the cost amounts as well.
Okay, all right, fair enough. I think there's no need for me to add to that one. All right. So here's another one. Is there a difference in developers from Kyiv versus other cities in Ukraine?
I can answer. Okay. Yeah. I cannot say there is a difference of developers who grew up in Kyiv or else cities. We can be reflecting over the quality of education or, like, experience these people could have. But speaking of facts, because these all would be, like, controversial conclusions that, like, some people may argue on, and we don't want this to happen. Speaking of Kyiv and else cities, I can just operate the numbers, and I am stating and I am claiming that Kyiv as a one city has approximately 40% of all developers in Ukraine, which means that every else city would be having fewer developers. If there is fewer developers, then fewer companies are coming to this specific city. And if there is a limited number of companies, then the experience these developers can be gaining is slightly lower than they could be getting in Kyiv. Just because in Kyiv there is a bigger competition for this bigger number of developers by bigger number of companies. And second part is that the companies, they, well, usually if they do not have some, like, their own story with some smaller city or town in Ukraine, they usually start with the capital, the biggest city, just because the variety of developers is bigger here. The competition in place, that's right. Yeah. So you need to convince the developers to accept your offer. But we tend to believe that in Kyiv, there is a bigger choice. More people are willing to move to Kyiv from else cities than moving from Kyiv to else cities and towns. So it all makes little things that may matter during the location selection, so to say. There might be some disadvantages as well. For example, I can say that in Kyiv, the salaries are considered to be higher than in else towns. I'm not saying how much higher they are. A little bit higher here, significantly higher than there. But yeah, as a capital city, it has cost of living, and the people are also expecting better wages. But these all are not as drastically jumping from zero to dozens of zeros.
Gotcha. Okay, so I have two more questions. This one is, what's the biggest demand you get from developers?
For developers or from developers?
From developers.
From developers. It's a good question. I can think of many. I'm not sure I can be saying it's the biggest one, but I would split our all developers that we have and those who were considering Mobilunity as their employer into little groups, so to say. To one group, it is very much important that the office is exactly in this neighborhood, just because they hate using public transport. And it will matter a lot now with the COVID times.
Yeah.
Once we are back to the office, well, they don't want to be risking, or they don't want to be on some public transport for like more than 15 minutes, for example. And that's one group of people.
Gotcha.
Other group of people may be saying they are driving the cars themselves and they enjoy being the car drivers, but they would want the cars to be somewhere parked in a safe and secure place. So the parking in the downtown where we are now might be a problem to many companies, just because, well, there is no space. Like in every big metropolis, there is no space in downtown to park.
No.
We are lucky and happy to be able to provision that. But again, like, it matters not to everyone. The others may say that, like, they hate open spaces. They want to be getting some intimacy with their colleagues from the same team, or maybe being on the offices where like 6, 8, maybe 10 people maximum, but it's not an open space where like there is 100 of people or 200 of people. And it may matter to some of them. Many would ask more about the client. And of course, these are very important questions. Like, well, the initial 3 that I named may be considered as something that as a package, as a benefits package that we are proposing. But understanding what domain the client is working in, what stack of technologies they're using, and what working process they're utilizing, these 3 items would probably be the most crucial and important for our recruiting team to be able to find the right talent. And for developers, they got to be asking these questions, because otherwise, like, if they don't ask these questions, I guess they're just probably seeking for a paycheck, maybe, or they're just willing to be part of our company, which I would be, of course, happy with. But typically, these questions are the most important, and these are demands from the developers to come. What technology will it be? Who will I work with? What kind of control will I have? Or for what kind of assistance will I have from the headquarters? Will I be working with a local project manager, or I'll be working with a Japanese project manager? What language will I use? What time am I supposed to be at work to be interacting with this specific client? What kind of tracking tool will I be using? Will it be Jira or Redmine or Trello or like Monday, whatever?
Okay, so basically the days of just having a developer want a computer, beanbags, and free coffee, that's over.
Not only over, but we find more and more senior people are not caring of this, really. They care about the client's product, project, and process, and they care less. They need the hardware, that's obvious. It must be a modern one, very fast, so like, it doesn't put the constraints over the performance of a developer. Beanbags, it is very important, and we have a couple of them, but really not a deal breaker to any of the developers that we used to talk to.
Gotcha. Okay, and I'll end it on this last one, because like I said, I don't want to take too much time. What is the first thing you're going to do once the quarantine has been lifted?
That's easy. I'm dreaming of a big party, because I'm missing those. We have a tradition in Mobilunity. We run monthly all gatherings. Like now, I wanted to say pizza parties, but sometimes we serve not pizza but something else. So the thing is that once a month we have a little agenda over what I could be talking to the whole team about, and we have some fun over there. So people get together. They are happy seeing new faces for those who just joined the company. They are happy seeing people from else floors. They are happy to hang out with a beer or with a non-alcohol drink, whatever beverage. They are happy to have an ability to interact with each other, and so much happy am I, just because I'm missing these gatherings a lot. And I would want to have a conversation with each and every of our guys and girls, how was this period of time when they were remote, and how easy was that, how good the collaboration with the teammates and everything. Of course, we have these meetings now. They are all in remote mode, and using the conferencing tools, and our resource management team is handling all these questions. and I'm running these little, let's say, meaningless chats with pretty much every team that we are having, but that's just different. In a live mode, that would be awesome, and I'm pretty sure on that. And I'm pretty sure the guys they are dreaming of the same. They want to be relieved from this lock and just to have a little bit of fun all together.
Yeah, I think I'm probably in the same boat on that one, right there with you, just because you want to talk to people, have a drink, and I think if you drink at home alone, you feel like an alcoholic. So you don't want to,
Yeah.
you want to see other people and socialize and talk to people. But yeah, I think a lot of people are feeling the same way, and I'm hoping that during this time, people will learn, will tune in to this show, and hopefully at some point we'll all be able to have a drink together at some point in the near future. So I think that's
Amen.
it. Yeah, there we go. Right. So that's it for now. I want to thank you for joining. We appreciate the insight, and yeah, I'm pretty sure this will be the first of many, and we're just getting started. So
Thank you, Alfie, for the show. I think it was a great pilot, and let's see it live very soon.
definitely looking forward to it. All right, so we are gonna sign off now from here in Kyiv, Ukraine. Thanks a lot, Kirill. And hey, I'm Alfie. This is Inside Nearshoring. Hope to see you again soon.